2nd, 1890, the Football League elected Sunderland Football Club to join their ranks, and so began a turbulent 100 years that was to see them win the First Division Championship 6 times, become Second Division champions once, and Third Division champions once. They also won the FA Cup twice, and yet, despite all this, there were periods of total frustration and despair. So it was only fitting that Sunderland should begin their centenary year where they belong, in the First Division. And what better way to start their home campaign than to meet Tottenham Hotspur, a team parading 2 of the year's outstanding World Cup players, Paul Gascoigne, a former Newcastle United hero, and striker Gary Lineker. But it was Sunderland who were to prove the better side on the day, and they were unlucky to take only a point in a goalless draw.
Kevin Ball strokes the ball forward to Gabbiadini. Back towards Gary Hours. Hours it is. Oh, that was a brilliant save. Hours should well have scored there, but equally it was a good save by the goalkeeper. Over it comes. Oh, and another save. This time, I think, off the chest of the goalkeeper. Sunderland on the attack. Gabbiadini. Kay up with him. Gabbiadini still going. Kay takes over. Kay! Gabbiadini! Gabbiadini! No! The referee has ruled it out. Under pressure from Mabbott. The clearance by Gascoigne. But Bennett keeping Lineker away from the ball. And then just pushing the ball into space for Agbula. Now Bracewell. Some quality defending by Sunderland tonight. And Gary Bennett stands out in that respect, although he's not alone. Cullen. Taking on Van Houw. Van Houw gets his foot there. Kay in support. It's back with Kay. Inside, wants the 1-2. It's played. Pulled back for Gabbiadini. Davenport. And somehow Spurs get that ball away. Gascoigne. Lineker, clever back heel, back to Gascoigne. Lineker going with Gascoigne, but a good interception by Bennett. But Spurs still have possession. It's Najim. Gascoigne. Bergson. Bergson on a good run. Keeps going. He's through, and a good save by Norman. 45 minutes are up. A look at the watch, the play goes on. Armstrong's play, an important one. He found Gabbiadini. Davenport, Gabbiadini tries a shot. It's past the goalkeeper, but also past the post.
But it was not at Roker Park that Sunderland began their league career on September the 13th, 1890. It was at their then ground here, just off Newcastle Road, a couple of miles away. Then it was one of the best grounds in the country. Now, it's a housing estate. That very first game was against Burnley, a team only in the league by virtue of re-election. Sunderland were expected to win. Sadly, they lost 3-2. At the end of the season, they finished 7th, the only time in their first 6 seasons that they were to finish outside the top 5 places. In fact, for the next 4 seasons, the club was to prove almost unbeatable. In 1891-92, they finished 5 points clear of the second club, Preston North End, and scored 93 goals in only 26 games. That season also saw them win 13 consecutive matches between November the 14th and April the 2nd. This still stands as a club record. During that purple patch, they scored 50 goals and conceded only 11. Top scorer was Johnny Campbell, who joined the club in the close season from Scottish club Renton. He scored 28 goals in the league and a further 6 in the cup, in which the club reached the semi-finals. They went down to Aston Villa, a club that was to jinx them in the cup on many more occasions. The following season was equally good, with the club again taking the league title. This was the season, incidentally, when the second division came into being. Promotion and relegation to be decided by a series of test matches between the bottom 2 in the first and the top 2 in the second. No worries for Sunderland, who became the first club to score 100 league goals in a season, losing only 4 of their 30 games. Once again, Johnny Campbell was top scorer with 28. Some of the results during that great season would make most modern fans green with envy. It included a 6-1 away win and a 6-0 home success against arch-rivals Aston Villa, an 8-1 home victory over West Brom, and 11 goals with no reply in their 2 matches against Newton Heath. By Sunderland standards, the following year was almost an anticlimax. They had to be content with a runners-up spot, the title going to who else but Aston Villa, who also beat them yet again in the Cup. During that season, Teddy Doig made 108 consecutive appearances in goal before the run was ended. In 14 seasons, Doig made 456 league and cup appearances. He was the first in a long line of superb keepers, including Albert McElroy, who made 227 league and cup appearances in the 20s, Johnny Mapson, who spanned 3 decades from the 30s to the 50s with 385 appearances, and of course Jim Montgomery, who made an incredible 623 appearances in the 60s and 70s, still a club record for any player. In 1894-95, the title came back to Wearside for the 3rd time in 4 seasons. Aston Villa finished only 3rd and Liverpool were relegated. This was the season that also saw them beat Fairfield 11-1 in the FA Cup. To this day, still their best performance in this competition. 5 of the goals were scored by inside right Jimmy Miller. The following 2 seasons saw a turnaround in fortunes, with the club finishing 5th in 1895-96, and the following season having to suffer the indignity of having to take part in the playoff series to avoid relegation. All hinged on the last match against Newton Heath. Thankfully, 2 goals by outside right James Gillespie saved the day. In 1897-98, Sunderland regained their momentum and finished runners-up to Sheffield United. It also saw the last match at the Newcastle Road Ground, in which, on April the 23rd, the last game of the season, they defeated Nottingham Forest 4-0. So it was on September the 10th, 1898, that the club moved to its present ground at Roker Park. It was officially opened by the Marquis of Londonderry, and Sunderland obliged by beating Liverpool 1-0. A crowd of 30,000 saw inside right Jim Leslie score that only goal. This 1898-99 season also saw the first league clash with neighbours Newcastle United, who'd been promoted from the 2nd Division. 30,000 people turned out on Christmas Eve for this first derby, and it was a real thriller, with Newcastle winning 3-2. Both Sunderland goals were scored by Leslie. However, in the return fixture at St James's Park, Sunderland gained revenge with a 1-0 victory, the goal coming from McClatchy. At the end of the season, Sunderland finished 7th, 6 places higher than Newcastle. The 1899-1900 season started well for Sunderland, winning 8 and drawing 1 of their first 11 games. However, they had to be content with 3rd place behind Aston Villa and Sheffield United. Nevertheless, in their first 10 seasons, they'd been champions 3 times, runners-up twice, and 3rd once. They'd also defied relegation once. The following season saw them go 1 better than the last, finishing as runners-up to Liverpool. Indeed, Sunderland lost only 6 times all season. It was also the season which saw the away fixture at Newcastle on Good Friday having to be called off when 70,000 people tried to crush into the ground, making play impossible. Sunderland's 4th title came in 1901-02, despite the fact that they only scored 50 goals. Top scorers that season were Billy Hogg and Jimmy Gemmell, with 10 apiece. The following season saw Sunderland deprived of their 5th title by Newcastle. They needed to beat United in the last match of the season at St James's, but lost 1-0 and had to be content with 3rd place. The following 5 seasons were less than memorable, with the club finishing 6th, 5th, 14th, 10th and 16th respectively. In 1904, Sunderland were involved in the country's first £500 transfer deal when they signed Alf Common from Sheffield for £520. A year later, Common was sold to Middlesbrough as the first £1,000 player. He only made 23 league and cup appearances, scoring 7 goals. The next real milestone in the club's history came in 1908-09. It was the season when they not only did the double over Newcastle, but in doing so set up their highest away victory, a record which still stands to this day. They beat United 9-1 at St James's. Billy Hogg and George Holly both hit hat-tricks, Arthur Bridget scored 2, and Jackie Mordew completed the scoring. And yet at half-time, the score had only been 1-1. This was ironic as Newcastle went on to win the title, and Sunderland had to be content with 3rd place. It was also ironic that in the same season they set their away record win, they also suffered their worst ever away defeat, beaten 8-1 at Blackburn. The next 2 seasons saw them finish 8th and 3rd, but it was also during the 1910-11 season that Charlie Buchan was signed from Leyton for £1,200. In his 10 seasons with the club, Buchan was leading scorer 7 times and scored a total of 224 league and cup goals. He would undoubtedly have scored many more if it hadn't been for the enforced break of 5 years in league football due to World War I. Charlie eventually left in 1925 when he was transferred to Arsenal in a strange but what proved to be a lucrative deal for Sunderland. The London club, who felt Buchan might be past his best, would only pay a £2,000 fee, but they did agree to pay a further £100 for every goal he scored during the season. Charlie obliged with 21, which meant Sunderland received altogether a grand total of £4,100. Perhaps Sunderland's most successful season was in 1912-13, when they gained their 5th league title, and in amassing 54 points, this in the days when a win only counted 2 points, beat the existing record for a league championship. And this despite taking only 2 points from their first 7 games. Victories included a double over Liverpool with a 7-0 home win in which Buchan scored 5, and a 5-0 away victory in which Buchan got a hat-trick. In the same season, Sunderland were to reach their first FA Cup final. In the quarter-final of the competition, they'd beaten Newcastle, but only after a terrific battle that needed 3 matches to get a decider.
This old film recalls that second replay when Sunderland scored 3 goals to put their rivals out of the running. In the words of an eyewitness, they played like men possessed.
In the final, however, in front of a crowd of over 120,000 at Crystal Palace, they lost 1-0 yet again to bogey team Aston Villa. Many people who travelled south failed to get into the ground. After that, Sunderland had no further successes up to the outbreak of World War I. In 1919-20, the first season after the war, the club finished 5th. The title went to West Brom. In 1925, when Buchan went to Arsenal, he was replaced by a great left-footed player called Dave Holliday, who was bought from Dundee. In 166 league outings for the club, Holliday scored 153 goals, plus a further 9 goals in 9 outings in the cup. A goal by Holliday helped the club avoid relegation in 1927-28 by beating Middlesbrough 3-0 away in the last match of the season. Holliday still holds the club record for the most goals in a season, 43 in 42 matches. This included 4 in one game and a further 3 hat-tricks in the 1928-29 season, in which the club finished 4th. He was transferred to Arsenal the following season for £6,000. Bob Gurney was to take over as leading scorer on Holliday's departure. Altogether, he scored 228 goals, making him to this day Sunderland's all-time top scorer. He scored in Sunderland's opening match of their great 1935-36 season at Arsenal, although they lost 3-1.
Soccer again, and the league teams come out to throw their thousands of supporters, nearly 1 million of them all over the country, and about 70,000 at Highbury to see the Arsenal, last year's champions, play last year's runners-up Sunderland in striped shirts. It's good to see the great game in full swing once more, and the Arsenal supporters in particular have a grand afternoon. The home side makes only one mistake, when Sunderland opened the score with a goal by Gurney early in the first half. After this, the Arsenal play like the champions they are, and give the Sunderland defence a most uncomfortable time. 2 of their 3 goals are scored in the first half, Drake netting the equaliser. Now the Arsenal have it all their own way and keep up a continuous pressure. Bastin puts them ahead, and most of the crowd realises that soccer has really begun.
Despite losing that opening game, Sunderland went on to clinch the title for the 6th time, 8 points clear of runners-up Derby County. They also scored 109 goals, 20 more than any other club, and to this day a club record. This broke Arsenal's run of 3 consecutive titles, and the home game between these clubs, which Sunderland won 5-4, has regularly been described as one of the best matches ever seen at Roker Park. They were presented with the League Championship trophy at Roker Park on April the 15th, after beating Huddersfield 4-3. During the season, Gurney scored 31 times, but that same number of goals was also scored by another player who was to become a club legend, Rage Carter. Carter had made his debut for the club in 1932, and in his 8 seasons with them he made 279 appearances and scored 130 goals in league and cup. But perhaps Carter's finest moment came in 1937, when he skippered the club to their first FA Cup, a trophy that had eluded them for 53 years. It was a wedding present for Rach, who just got married in the week leading up to the final, in which they beat Preston 3-1 at Wembley.
The coaches that have brought the fans from the north are a strange sight in a London hit by a bus strike, but these supporters don't mind walking to Wembley. The final is more than a game of football, it's an occasion, and rivalries are forgotten as the huge crowd sings the traditional Abide With Me. The royal couple arrive at the stadium and they bring a guest with them, King Farouk of Egypt. Wonder which side he'll be shouting for. This is indeed a royal final. Here come the teams that have battled their way through those tense early rounds to be within 90 minutes of victory. It's a tense time for them, but they'll never forget this day. Sunderland are introduced to His Majesty by their captain, Horatio Carter. It's a few words of royal congratulation and then on to the game itself. The Preston fans are happy after the first half, no wonder. They've seen O'Donnell put them 1 goal up. The Wearsiders urge their side on, and how well they respond. The wily Burbank wins a corner on the right. Over it comes, and Carter nods it to Gurney, who heads it past Burns. 1-1, and everything to play for now. That's a goal that'll give them something to talk about in the shipyards. And there's more to come. Burbank's lovely pass finds Gurney, who moves it along for his captain, and it's Carter who slams that ball into the net. How's that, Your Majesty? What a game Burbank's having at Wembley. He spots a pass from Gallagher and chases through to make it 3-1, and proud Preston are humbled. The King won't have seen many better finals than this one. Everybody knows it's Sunderland's cup, but they forgot to tell Preston, who keep fighting every step of the way. Both sides have given everything, but the crowd won't let them stop until referee Rudd brings it to an end. It's all over, and the Sunderland side climb to the royal box, where Her Majesty will present the medals. It's Captain Rach Carter who's given the trophy so many teams have tried for. And there's a word from the Queen about Carter's recent marriage. Not a bad wedding present for Mrs. Carter. But now it's a chance for the Sunderland team to show their cheering followers the trophy. What a team! They won the league last year, and now the cup.
The homecoming of the victorious team was delayed until the evening, so that work would not be interrupted. When the team did arrive back in Sunderland, there were thousands out to greet them. At the town hall, they were given a civic welcome by the mayor. Gurney's goal in that final took his all-time tally of cup goals for the club to 23, still a club record. Regretfully, it was in the 4th round of the cup that season, at home to Luton, that another club great, left-winger Jimmy Connor, had his career ended by injury. In 9 seasons, he'd played 284 games and scored 61 goals in league and cup. 2 seasons later, World War II brought an end to first-class football in the country until 1946. The first of Sunderland's post-war heroes was to be Len Shackleton, who in 1948 decided to join the club from Newcastle after a disagreement with the United management. That 12-mile move was to break the hearts of Newcastle supporters, but delight Wearside crowds for the next 10 years. Signed for a then record fee of £20,050, Shaq, who was to be nicknamed the Clown Prince of soccer, was to become the leading post-war goalscorer. a great entertainer. He played 348 league and cup games and scored 102 goals.
Fleming across to Shackleton, number 11. To Elliott. And Shackleton coming through on his own. He must score now. Shackleton this time for Sunderland, taking a little time, but he scores a great goal, a beautifully placed shot.
The 1948-49 season saw one of the biggest shocks in the history of the FA Cup, and Sunderland were on the wrong end of it. In a fourth-round away tie against Southern League club Yeovil Town, they went down after extra time.
Cup fever grips Britain and Somerset finds itself centre of the footballing world. Giant-killing Yeovil, a team of part-timers who became heroes overnight, made soccer history before an 18,000 record crowd. Having buried a second division team, Yeovil now tackle first division Sunderland, former cup winners and team of proud records. Knowing how the land lies, Yeovil are neither overawed by the occasion nor by Len Shackleton, number 10, football's most expensive player, and not even by the 8-foot slope. The Southerners play fast, open football, and encouraged by a jubilant crowd, go all out to take the sun out of Sunderland. And in the 28th minute, the unbelievable comes true. A well-judged free kick by Stan Hickman sends the ball into the Sunderland goal mouth. It bobs around dangerously, comes loose, and with a quick turn, skipper Alex Stock slams it in.
The following season saw Sunderland come within an ace of their 7th title. In April, with the season almost over, the club was odds-on to take the title, but 3 successive defeats against Middlesbrough, Manchester City and Huddersfield meant Portsmouth taking the title on goal average from Wolverhampton Wanderers, with Sunderland a point behind 3rd. A victory in any of those 3 games would have brought the title to Wearside. Top scorer that season was Dickie Davies, who'd been brought to Sunderland from the Birmingham youth team just before the war started, but he didn't play till 1946. In just over 7 seasons, he scored 79 goals in 154 matches before being transferred to Darlington. In 1950-51, Sunderland again broke the transfer record when they paid Aston Villa £30,000 for Welsh international Trevor Ford. In his home debut, Ford hit a hat-trick in the club's 5-1 win over Sheffield Wednesday. One of his shots even dislodged a goalpost. In the team during that season were 3 current internationals: Ford, Willie Watson, who incidentally also represented England at cricket, and Len Shackleton. Plus 3 internationals to be in Billy Bingham, Tommy Wright and Ivor Broadis. Yet, despite all this talent, the club could only finish 5th. One of their victories that season was against Middlesbrough. Watson, Ford, Shackleton and Wright all being in the side.
Sunderland, striped shirts, were playing what might be described as a new side and were right on their toes from the start. Yes, it was quickly seen that the visitors had their work cut out, and within 10 minutes Sunderland opened the scoring with a goal by Kirtley. That was all for the first half, but in the second period, Sunderland continued to have the best of the game, making one dangerous attack after another. In spite of all Middlesbrough's efforts, they could not prevent Sunderland going further ahead, but with 2 goals against them, they came back strongly. During the last period of the match, Middlesbrough were working well together and putting on the pressure. They were rewarded, not with victory, but at least with a goal when Spula netted.
The following 2 seasons saw no great improvement. So in 1953, the Sunderland board, in an attempt to achieve some success, spent £61,000, an absolutely unheard of sum in those days, on 3 international players. They bought goalkeeper Jimmy Cowan from Morton, centre-half Ray Daniel from Arsenal, and outside left Billy Elliott from Burnley. This led to the club being dubbed the Bank of England club. But apart from a fourth place in 1954-55, the 50s were a dismal decade for Sunderland, with little to relieve the gloom. This was especially sad because in those days the club had real support, including a 51,000 gate against Blackpool in that 54-55 season. Even this was only an average gate, because in that same season over 66,000 watched the home derby against Newcastle. An interesting match to be played at Roker in the mid-50s was in November 1955, when the famous Russian side, Moscow Dynamo, came to Roker as part of a British tour. An all-ticket crowd of 55,000 turned out under the floodlights for this game, but like almost everything during this era, it was to end in disappointment.
The usual exchange of courtesies at Roker Park were followed by Sunderland kicking off in their floodlit encounter with Dynamo in white shirts. Sunderland, top of the league at the time, were out to emulate the Wolves and defeat the visiting Russians. But Dynamo were not going back to Moscow empty-handed if they could help it. Plenty of nice football, but no goals in the first half. Shackleton, number 11, who had been put on the wing, was frequently prominent and worked away like anything. Perhaps he should have been on the inside. Anyway, Dynamo not only beat off all Sunderland raids, they had the best of the game throughout. But it was 3 minutes from time when they scored the winner through Ilyin. That was it. Dynamo retrieved some of their reputation and, well, thanks for the game.
The only other bright spot that season was a reasonable cup run that saw them reach the semi-finals after a 2-0 quarter-final victory over cup holders Newcastle United at St James Park.
St James's Park, Newcastle, and the cup holders wearing white shirts, all ready to set the ball rolling in their sixth-round encounter with Sunderland. Besides their fans, the Roker Park team had brought a whole bag full of soccer tricks to embellish this #1 North East Cup tie. After 40 minutes, a lob from Shackleton was headed in by Bill Holder. Fleet-of-foot Milburn, United's outside right, foils the Roker defence, but they hold the Geordies off. They've got plenty of cards up their sleeves, the winning hand, in fact. Bill Holden shouts trumps, and it's in. The cup holders are out, and Sunderland are in the semi-final for the second-year run.
After the euphoria of that win, however, came more gloom when they were beaten in the semi-final by Birmingham. But things were to get even worse. In 1956-57, the club finished 20th, just avoiding relegation. And in June 1957, manager Bill Murray resigned. This after a Football League commission had found the club guilty of making illegal payments to certain players. Months later, it was stated that the commission had exceeded its authority, and a fine of £5,000 was repaid to the club and suspensions of board members lifted. All too late for Murray. In August 1957, Alan Brown arrived at Roker to take over as manager. But only 3 wins in the first 11 games meant the club was again heading for trouble. In an attempt to stem the tide, Brown dug deep into the club's finances and spent £18,000 on a young centre-half from Millwall called Charlie Hurley. But the 20-year-old Irishman had a baptism of fire. His first game saw the club beaten 7-0 at Blackpool. He even put through his own goal. Despite this rocky start, Charlie was to become a great favourite in his 12 years with the club and became one of the finest centre-halves in the country, to gain the nickname King Charlie. Indeed, in 1979, the Sunderland fans named him Player of the Century. But, regretfully, in that black season of 57-58, Sunderland were relegated from the First Division for the first time in their 68-year league history. And it was to be 6 seasons later before the club was to return to the top flight. Before that, however, Brown was to sign another of the club's post-war greats, a certain Brian Clough, who was bought from Middlesbrough for about £45,000. Cloughie in all scored 63 goals in 74 appearances.
Back to Hurd.
Screws it along. Clough lost. Yes! Clough has done it. In the 39th minute, Clough puts Sunderland 1 up. Chip. Clough's there, it's in! Oh, what a delightful header. And an even better chip. Clough with a chance. Yes, it's there! A brilliant piece of opportunism by Brian Clough. Now it's Hurd on the ball. Clough. Yes, it's there, my word. Still got it. Oh, it's there! Clough has done it again.
In that 61-62 season, the club changed its strip. The black shorts changed to white, and the red and white shirts were matched by red and white socks. Brian Clough scored 29 goals, including 4 hat-tricks, and the club needed to win their last match at Swansea to gain promotion. Sadly, they only managed a 1-1 draw and had to settle for 3rd place, 1 point behind runners-up Leyton Orient. The club began the 62-63 season with confidence. 2 more new faces appeared in Scottish international George Mulhall from Aberdeen for £25,000 and Johnny Crossan from Standard Liège for £26,700. Unfortunately, in the 3rd match of the season at Leeds, inside left Willie McFeet was carried off with a broken leg, an injury that ended his career. But then came an even bigger disaster. On Boxing Day 1962 against Bury, Brian Clough chased a ball into the penalty area, only to collide awkwardly with keeper Harker. A badly torn ligament meant Clough's highly promising career as a player was virtually over. The man with the unenviable task of taking over his place was a young Scottish player, Dominic Sharkey. But in 17 matches, young Nick was to score 11 goals, including 5 against Norwich. So, once again, Sunderland needed only a draw in the last game of the season against Chelsea to go up. But once again, they were to have success snatched away, losing by the only goal of the match in front of a crowd of almost 48,000.
And this is the moment for which we've all been waiting. The match that will decide whether or not Sunderland hit the jackpot and go up into the First Division next season. 1 point will be sufficient to see them there, and the mood that this wonderful crowd is in on this rainy, windy afternoon should, I think, enable the Roker players to achieve that target. Still waiting for them to come out. Chelsea are already on their field in their royal blue shirts and white shorts, blue stockings, and I can hardly hear myself talk as the roar goes up as Stan Anderson leads out the Sunderland 11. Absolutely fantastic roar from this wonderful crowd. They can cheer their heads off in spite of the pouring rain and the rather dismal wind. They're here this afternoon to cheer their favourites on, and my word, they intend to do so if this is any indication. Now it's McCready. McCready still got it. Kevin there, and Harmer would be dangerous. And McNabb concedes a corner, the first for Chelsea, with 25 minutes gone. Oh, it's there! It's a goal! Well, my word, the Sunderland defence were caught completely napping. As Tambling's corner came across there and caught the Sunderland defence completely napping. So after 25 minutes, Sunderland are 1 down.
And that was the goal that put Chelsea in the First Division and kept Sunderland in the Second Division.
But after 2 near misses, the club was not to be denied a 3rd time. Sunderland gave their fans a taste of things to come as far back as November, when leading Portuguese side Benfica, including their star player Eusebio, came to Roker Park. They went down 5-3 to a vintage Sunderland display.
Good ball through there to Hurd. Hurd is onside, and Hurd scores. Hurd scored for Sunderland just a few minutes after the restart. Benfica kicking off again.
substitute, outside right. Oh, and a very dangerous move there, and it's a goal. Flicks it through to Sharkey. Back to Sharkey. Sharkey shoots, and it's a goal. It's a goal. A lovely goal there by Sharkey. Out to Mulhall. Mulhall bringing it away for Sunderland now. Going on the outside, and it's Mulhall. Oh, and a terrific shot, and it's a goal! Oh, beautiful move there. A lovely move. Mulhall brought the ball the length of the pitch, and it was left to Sharkey to pick up that ricochet which came off the goalkeeper and crack it in the net for a glorious goal. And the crowd erupting with excitement here as Sunderland go 3-1 into the lead after 20 minutes, just gone 20 minutes in the second half. Seraphim, and now it's Sunderland with their tails up, and it's Crossan flicking that ball through to Hurd. Hurd to Sharkey. Oh, and a lovely goal by Sharkey. Magnificent goal.
By March, promotion was almost odds-on when Preston, who were lying third to Sunderland's second, were thrashed 4-0.
Good cross. And Crossan has touched it. He has scored. What a good cross. 25 minutes. Crossan has put Sunderland in the lead.
Crossan trying to stick that one through Lawton's legs, but it's Elliott now.
Shocking neat flick inside of Mulhall. There's a chance. And he fires right-handed. And it's a goal. What a wonderful goal from the outside left. After 29 and a half minutes, Mulhall made it 2-0.
So it's a free kick to Sunderland. It's taken by Crossan to Mulhall.
And it's turned over by Alan Kelly.
Short one to Sharkey. Sharkey touching it back to him. Elliott. Gonna get a goal. They touch it back to Ashurst. To Mulhall. And this time Hurd gets it stuck in. It's there. It's a goal. Sharkey flicks it in. 33 minutes. Sharkey flicking in from Hurd. Hurd. Usher. He tries to find Sharkey, but Tony Singleton, the Preston centre-half, is there to hold him. And Hurley beating Dawson. Now it's Hurd. Third forward for Sharkey. Can he reach it before Kelly? No, the Preston goalkeeper's there first. Well, Sunderland fans kind of complain that their team have let them down so far in this match. One wonders if they can add to this impressive total of 3-0. Inside left, Spavin. Touch back to Lawton. And Lawton trying to find his right winger, finds Len Ashurst there. They head it over for a Preston throw. Nine minutes left in this half. And some remember attacking their favourite aim in the second half. Sharkey inside a Crossan. And a long ball from Crossan to Usher. And he's round the full-back. Sharkey knocks it in. It's a goal. A wonderful goal.
The win against Swansea saw them just 4 points away from the promotion they so badly wanted.
Hurd failing to control that one. That's Williams. Williams trying to find his wingman, Brian Evans. But it's the Sunderland right winger who's got it. Usher's got it. Can he control it?
Oh, it's in! He scored! Well, Usher... Well, if Usher hadn't made sure of it, Noel Dwyer certainly did.
But the last match of the season saw them beat Charlton 2-1 at Roker to gain promotion. Captain Charlie Hurley was chaired shoulder high for a lap of honour, and it brought this tribute from manager Brown.
And I'm personally very, very grateful to the manner in which the players have fought their way through to this successful conclusion. They deserve every praise, and I would like to say a special word for those that have been with the club when things were bad, particularly the captain, Charlie Hurley. No praise can be too high for him, and no praise can be too high for the players in the loyal way which have supported the quiet discipline that prevails in this club. Very happy for them, and mustn't exaggerate our part in the matter at all. It's purely a player's success. I feel very humbly grateful to them.
During this 63-64 season, they lost only 6 matches and were runners-up to Leeds United. But this was also the season that had seen 3 epic quarter-final FA Cup battles against Manchester United.
With the defeat of Everton, cup fever spread like a prairie fire. Everyone wanted a ticket for the tough away game against cup holders Manchester United at Old Trafford. 16,000 travelled from Wearside to see a Sunderland team which had 19-year-old reserve left half David Elliott deputising again for the injured Jimmy McNabb. Manchester United supporters, amused by the cockiness and high spirits of the Wearside fans, lost most of their own gaiety when Johnny Crossan shot Sunderland into a 1-goal lead. Sensing a victory if they kept up the pressure, the confident Sunderland forwards teased and tormented the United defence, and Johnny Crossan was awarded a penalty kick, which he equally promptly converted. But shortly afterwards, with Sunderland leading 2-0, the centre-half and captain Charlie Hurley put through his own goal to make it 2-1, and the game finally ended in a 3-3 draw.
Well, it was one of the worst moments in my football career, because I've not scored in my own goal for 4 years, and it was just one of those things. It came across, and I thought it was winning 2-0, so I thought I'll just glance it back to Monty. And I think he shouted, but the crowd were yelling that much, I didn't hear him, you see, and it was the worst sight in the world to see that bubbling back into the net there.
You won't try it again?
Oh, never again. That's me finished. I think I'll never pass back again after that.
As in the previous game, Sunderland were first to score as Dominic Sharkey scored the vital goal. And onto the pitch swarmed the jubilant supporters. Johnny Crossan was unlucky when he delayed his shot, and goalkeeper David Gaskell had a chance to recover. Matt Busby looked a very worried man. But Manchester United fought strongly for the equalising goal, and it came in the 62nd minute when Dennis Law scored. And he restored the confidence of Matt Busby and the whole Manchester United contingent. With the scores level at the end of 90 minutes, extra time was played, and a Sunderland move led to Maurice Seddis putting through his own goal, and it looked as though United were out of the cup. But in the closing minutes, centre-forward Bobby Charlton headed the equaliser. Whatever the general feelings were after the Roker incident, the second replay at Huddersfield again saw thousands of Wearside supporters making the journey. The heavy pitch was not a welcome sight. As before, Sunderland scored first through Dominic Sharkey in the 47th minute. But this lead was to be short-lived, and following a right-wing move, Dennis Law scored the equaliser within 30 seconds. The strain of 5 hours cup football was beginning to tell. Sunderland, who had the league programme in the forefront of their thoughts throughout the cup run, were no match on the night for the Manchester United side, which had rested its star players on the previous Saturday. Matt Busby's tactic, taken as a compliment by the Sunderland team, did the trick.
Well, that season was to be the last to thrill the fans for the rest of the decade. The club struggled to stay in the top flight, always finishing in the bottom half of the table. Manager Alan Brown, having achieved promotion, left the club in July '64 to go to Sheffield Wednesday. To compound this, goalkeeper Jimmy Montgomery sustained a hand injury in pre-season training, and the club had to open their return to Division 1 by playing a 15-year-old keeper, Derek Foster, against Leicester City. The match ended in a 3-3 draw, and in the next 2 games, Foster conceded a further 7 goals. So the directors, who were still running the side, bought Sandy McLaughlin from Kilmarnock to take over. That match against West Brom also saw Brian Clough achieve a lifelong ambition to play in the First Division. But after a 20-month layoff, it was to be a fleeting comeback, as he was to play in only 2 more games, scoring in 1. When he was offered the manager's job at Hartlepool in October 1965, he was asked how difficult it had been to make the transition from player to manager.
Perhaps difficult is not quite the right word. It's been hard work more than anything else. Hard work to adjust to dealing with players instead of being a player yourself.
Do you still miss the big-time atmosphere?
Not so much a big-time atmosphere. What I do miss, very, very much indeed, and I'm conscious of it all the time, is playing the game.
In November, former England international fullback George Hardwick was appointed manager, but after only 18 months he was relieved of his duties. Scottish national manager Ian McCall took his place. He fared little better, with the club always struggling. Then, in 1968, McCall left, and to a somewhat mixed reception, Alan Brown returned to the club. But in 69-70, the club reached a low ebb. Beaten in the League Cup by a third division side, Bradford City, beaten in the FA Cup by second division Leicester, and then finally relegation after finishing second bottom. They won only 6 games, their worst record since their very first season in the league in 1890. They had a bad opening to their second division campaign, finishing only 13th, but during that season centre-half Dave Watson arrived from Rotherham along with Dick Malone from Ayr. These signings, coupled with Brown's youth policy, started to pay dividends, brought improvements, and in 1971-72 they were battling for promotion. But 2 bad home defeats near the end of the season meant they had to be content with 5th place. So Sunderland set out with high hopes in the 72-73 season, but with just 4 wins in the first 14 games, they found themselves struggling at the wrong end of the table. Brown was relieved of his duties in November,